Yeah, we'll do IoT first.
There you go.
So since our panel has been reduced to two, it's more of a duet. So instead of acting as moderator and me just peppering you with questions like a job interview for the next hour, what I thought I'd do is talk about a project that was a big part of my life for the last nearly 2 years in Canada. And it was a project to work towards securing the Internet of Things in Canada. It's now complete, much more complete than my presentation is, because I wasn't planning on presenting, so I had to rush and find a presentation and stress you out trying to get it loaded in time. Yeah, I'll talk about the work we did in Canada on securing IoT. One of the things I told Satish before is, you know, when I started really thinking about this panel this morning, on my way in, I drove from Ottawa, it's only 2 hours away. What came to mind is, you know, we structured this panel as how will IoT, blockchain, AI impact internet governance. And I think it's the flip side that's true in some ways. How does internet governance impact IoT, AI, and blockchain? And the reason I say that is because, you know, we've lived with the internet for the better part of 3 decades now as a public resource, and we have established governance structures. And I'm sure everyone in the room over the past day or so has heard an awful lot about the multi-stakeholder model and how it's, you know, the best model for governing shared resources like the internet. We're also at the same time faced with some really complex policy issues. You know, governing AI, governing blockchain, governing IoT, these are incredibly complex issues. And it's not really feasible to expect the government to come in and regulate them and make us safe from, you know, rogue AI or rogue IoT devices. Really, I think, and you'll see in my presentation, the multi-stakeholder model that has been so successful in the internet governance world really needs to be exported to other the policy issues surrounding other technologies like we're talking about today. So I'm not going to go through all of the preamble slides in too much detail. What they basically tell us is that we're connecting a lot of things to the internet very quickly, and that is increasingly affecting our security. It puts not only the privacy of individual users at risk, it puts the security of the internet at large at risk. I know Andrew Sullivan, the Internet Society's CEO, was here yesterday and talked about the future of internet governance. I don't know if he told you the story about his previous career prior to joining the Internet Society. He was with a company called Dyn, which is a major provider around the world for internet services. Dyn was also Dyn's famous or infamous for being the victim of one of the largest denial of service attacks in history, propagated by IoT devices. They were predominantly unsecured security cameras in Vietnam, and shut down a good chunk of the internet on the eastern half of North America about 3 years ago. So Andrew speaks to this from a very good perspective. To let you know, the project I'm talking about here, Andrew was actually our chair even before he joined ISOC. So the Internet of Things, this tremendous growth of the Internet of Things is providing us with a few challenges. First of all, you know, we're entering into a more convenient world. You know, you can lock your door from your phone. You can, you know, I can check on my dog through my dog camera that I have in my house. Actually, after this project, I would never put a camera in my house. But all of these devices, and we're talking, you know, hundreds of millions coming online, they add a new threat vector to the internet. And all too often, the marketing gets ahead of the technology. Devices are manufactured, are developed, manufactured, and sent to market before there are even standards for them, and very little consideration for device security. You think about, my favorite example is like coffee pot. You know, there's connected coffee pots now. So you have a coffee pot manufacturer who's like, we need to connect our coffee pot to the internet. I have no idea why anyone would want to do that. But still, you know, everybody, the marketing's pushing it, and you got to connect your coffee pot to the internet. So what do? You buy the $5 chip from China, you stick it in your coffee maker, suddenly you've got an internet connected coffee maker. Except you're a coffee pot manufacturer. You're not an internet security expert. You don't have internet, your mindset, if you're a coffee pot manufacturer, is not going towards the security of what you're putting on the internet. And there are many, many devices that are going to market without sufficient protections to keep us and the rest of the internet safe. So our key challenges are that we've got tons of new devices coming online, tons of new apps, new platforms, new services, new touch points for consumers using devices, and currently a lack of defined standards globally or nationally for the security of these devices. So think about sustainability. If you're using a Fitbit, if you're using any of these devices that track your biometrics, do you know who's holding that data, how secure it is? One of the big issues we needed to address was life cycle supportability. If you buy an internet-connected washer or dryer or coffee pot, how often is the software that connects that to the internet going to be updated? And at some point, are they just going to stop supporting those devices? And if they do stop providing security updates, is it a threat to security, or does it automatically disconnect from the internet? Does your washer stop working? The other challenge we have is who's responsible for secure and private IoT. You know, you've got consumers, you've got developers, you've got manufacturers, you've got your service providers, all of that. So we saw the need to address IoT security in Canada, but we also saw the complexity of the ecosystem, and how do we create some sort of policy recommendations to govern the security of IoT in Canada, given all of the massive amounts of moving parts, the number of organizations involved. So what we did is approach the Government of Canada, Innovation Science and Economic Development, to partner with them on a year-long multi-stakeholder project to engage all of the various stakeholders in the IoT community in Canada, and through a multi-stakeholder process, develop a set of recommendations to secure IoT. Recommendations for consumers, for government, for the private sector, you name it. We ultimately ended up partnering with ISED, which is the Government of Canada, CANARI, which is the NREN for Canada, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, who were here yesterday. I think Josh presented yesterday, and an internet policy think tank at the University of Ottawa called CIPIC. We called it the Canadian Multi-Stakeholder Process for Enhancing IoT Security. That's the logo. So our goal was to bring together a diverse range of stakeholders within the IoT ecosystem to develop recommendations for two broad thematic areas: consumer protection and network resiliency. IoT security, to say you're going to make IoT secure is what's the saying about boiling the ocean or something. We needed to start with something that we could accomplish, given we were the Internet Society, CIRA, and an NREN. We can easily look at consumer protection and network resiliency. These are two areas where we had expertise, and they're also two areas where you can make a tangible impact in a short amount of time. Our driver for this project was that in speaking with our government colleagues, it became apparent that, you know, the next big incident that involves insecure IoT devices is always just around the corner. We don't know when it is, we don't know how big it's going to be. And if, in fact, there was a major event, there would be push for the Canadian government to regulate Internet of Things devices. And they wanted to be able to have, like the internet, have a light touch approach to regulating IoT. So we thought if we have a multi-stakeholder process, we can do this without, hopefully in advance of a major attack. So over the course of a year, we held 5 in-person multi-stakeholder working meetings in Ottawa, Toronto. We held one in Montreal. We did a lot of desktop research, so looking at other countries who've done similar projects. And we also formed a number of working groups that would go away, do research in a particular area and report back to the broader group. We wound up having about 87 organizations in Canada participate, and a number of government departments as well. 160 individuals participated in the larger stakeholder meetings, those 5 meetings we talked about. In terms of who we engaged in the process, universities, private sector government, anyone involved in the research and development of internet-connected devices, private enterprise, that was device manufacturers, organizations that offer IoT-related products and services, heavy involvement from the technical and security community, everyone from law enforcement, the RCMP were involved, to network operators and the research community, as well as the internet policy community. We also had participants from other countries who were engaged, including the US government. Breakdown of stakeholder groups. Most interesting to see that the majority was from the private sector, and second was from government. So our focus wound up being 3 areas. I said we went in with 2 areas. As we got further into the project, it became clear that there were 3 distinct areas that have to be addressed in Canada for IoT security. First, consumer education. We need Canadian consumers of IoT devices to be able to make informed decisions. Coming out of the working group that was working on consumer education, we formed a labeling working group, because it became clear that the best way to let consumers know whether or not the device they were buying met a certain security standard was through some sort of labeling regime. And finally, again, network resiliency. This was led by the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. Josh may have talked about their project for the Secure Home Gateway. It would be a gateway into your house through which all IoT devices would connect to the broader internet, thereby reducing the risk because you can secure the gateway. We worked on Slack and email. It's funny, we tried working through listservs and email, and people really didn't like it, but Slack took off. It was fascinating. So we finished all of the research in January 2019 and launched the final report in May of 2019 at Internet Day in Canada. So if you want to see what we've accomplished, IoTsecurity2018.ca. I'm not going to go through the recommendations. The report's out there. It's 90 pages long. If you're interested, there is also a 2-page summary, which is, I think, the one that everybody. That's the one that everyone's read. The one point I will make, I'm just going to. We can pull that one down. One point I will make is that. IoT, like the internet, one country, one group can't secure it on its own. Devices like internet traffic don't recognize national borders. So we viewed this as as Canada doing its part to secure IoT globally. There was a similar process coordinated by the NTIA in the US. They came out with recommendations on upgradability of devices, but our process has since been exported to Senegal, Uruguay, and France. They've replicated the process in those 3 countries. 2 weeks ago, we launched what's called the IoT Security Platform. Through this project, we wound up meeting various governments from around the world who are interested or wanting to do similar things and cooperate on IoT security. I think we have 9 or 10 governments involved in the security platform, and they released a statement a week and a half, 2 weeks ago on securing IoT. So yeah, our output was actually this report of recommendations, but I think our success was really building a community within Canada that started thinking about IoT security, because it's not top of mind for anyone, and then building this global community of governments and NGOs and the technical community who are now collaborating on sharing information, sharing best practices, and again, feeding back into this global group on how we can secure IoT. That's me. Tell us all about AI.
Right. So thanks for that introduction and the IoT part of things. I think there are several challenges, as was pointed out, when you apply the multi-stakeholder model onto some of the technical domains. This part of the presentation, I have 2 parts. I'll do the first part in about 8 minutes or so, if there is interest. The second part is about something called Libra, which some of you might have heard of. It is a Facebook offering, but that's pretty much technical, so I don't want to get into that. But before that, we will see the generic aspects of, can we apply the multi-stakeholder principles in cryptocurrency governance? So, quickly summarizing some of the properties of cryptocurrencies. They are decentralized. So by definition, you can't have a central point because that can be shut down by the government, etc., etc. So these things never have a central point. They are completely a network of people who want to join. No entry barriers. If you have a computer, you can be a part of the network. It's permissionless, doesn't require a government ID. You don't create an account, not like a bank. The actual use cases remain anonymous. Not perfectly anonymous, but kind of weak anonymity. They are censorship resistant. So no government can freeze your account or your money, which is pretty much the case with many other the traditional banking mechanisms. It is actually very low cost compared to bank. If you want to transfer some money from, say, Canada to China, you have a fee that you pay to the bank. And this could be quite significant. But in the case of crypto, this is actually quite trivial compared to the amount. It is deflationary, not inflationary. Governments end up printing notes if they are running in deficit. And that actually reduces the value of your savings and your assets. But crypto is not like that. The transfers are near real time, maybe 10 minutes. It's quite convenient because you can have a very large amount of money in a single USB drive in your pocket. There is no reason to have a big suitcase for holding the money. The transactions are public and visible, but the parties are anonymous and invisible. Now each currency has a community of its own. So unlike the fiat currency of the government, which the government mechanisms are there to back it up, cryptos do not have any such mechanism, but they have a community. And when you talk about governance of crypto, you're actually referring to how the community manages this whole crypto system. So in our multi-stakeholder model, we have different communities. We have different stakeholders. We have the government, we have the business, we have the end users, we have technical community. In crypto, what happens is there are different categories again, but these are not the same as the multi-stakeholder model. We have normal users who transact, who pay for things that they buy using crypto. That's the simplest use case. We have merchants who accept these payments. We have investors who actually use the crypto as a value store. This could be speculative also. So they are holding their part of their wealth as crypto. In many cases, in the hope that this will rise. And Bitcoin has gone from 10,000 Bitcoins to $1 to yesterday's value is about 10,000 USD per Bitcoin. That's a tremendous kind of a hike. Then developers who are actually creating this, the platforms, miners. So without getting into details, miners are people who invest in these computers. Because these computers need networks. In order to be really secure, we need large number of people participating. And that means somebody has to put in these investments. And the miners are the ones who largely do that. And in return, they are compensated with the currency. We have then core platform developers and some kind of a governance group which comes from these groups. There are also other entities like the media, regulators, and the governments. Now, many governments have no clue how to deal with crypto. In the US, for example, there are conflicting laws, some of which say that you have to kind of provide the details of the crypto that you own. In some other countries, the government is only bothered when you convert crypto into the local currency, at which point they are taxed. So in the US, it's actually a hybrid, and we still don't have full clarity here. There are also malicious actors who want to break into the currency platform and steal money. But what the first of these Bitcoin proved was using something called Byzantine fault tolerance. These malicious actors are part of the design, and they don't really create a threat to the core currency. But people actually lose currency because their hard disk crashed, they did not make a backup, or they were social engineered into revealing their private keys, in which case there you lose the money, not because of the platform weaknesses, but because of their own weaknesses. Now, there are some conflicts of interest between these categories, but all of them are usually assumed to have the long-term sustainability of the platform. Like Bitcoins, the miners may have a little bit of conflict of interest with the users, because it's a zero-sum game maybe. But all the community is still interested in the long-term sustenance of the platform. And that's the reason why the value of these currencies keep rising. Now, if you want to govern these platforms, how do you do that? The problem is that many of these community members are anonymous. They don't have the names. So how do you have any voting if people